think we got to the bottom of 30. We got towards the bottom of 30b to Lamed Amid Beis. We're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think 7 lines from the bottom.
First word?
L'shiva is the first word on the word. We're on the second word of the line. So we're in the middle of we're talking about the sukkah, and the idea that the sukkah is muksa all 7 days or rather the entire Yom Tov sukkah. You cannot make it that this, unlike the decorations, you cannot. There's no way for you to go ahead and make the sukkah not being muksa. So now we ask, so mashna mahad itma, why is it even that which we wrote? Hifresh shiva esrogim the shiva hayamim. If one separates, you have 7 esrogim for 7 days, meaning every day of Yom Tov you have another esrog. We're on 30b. Jules, what is it? 30b.
B2.
30b2. Towards the bottom.
Go to the very bottom.
On the very bottom, yeah.
Thanks.
So, hifresh shiva esrogim the shiva hayamim. If you go ahead and you separate 7 esrogim, and every single day I'm going to take another esrog. So what's the halacha? After you're done using it as the mitzvah of esrog, are you permitted to go ahead and eat it now? I mean, is it muksa or not? So Rav held that we had this in Sukkah, that if you remember this Gemara from Sukkah, that every day, in the morning when you finish using it as a mitzvah, when you completed the mitzvah of shaking the lulav and esrog, now you could go ahead and eat the esrog. It's not muksa. That you can't eat it that day, you can eat it the next day after you're done with your mitzvah, after nightfall of the day that you actually used this esrog for a mitzvah, and then you could go ahead and eat it. So regardless, why? So regardless, you have a question. Why by sukkah do we say that if the onset of Yom Tov, the sukkah is set aside for the mitzvah, now it's going to be muksa the entire 7? So what's different than the esrog? The esrog is also set aside for a mitzvah every day. Each one was set aside for a mitzvah. So the onset of Yom Tov should also be muksa for all 7. Why does one say you're allowed to go ahead and eat it immediately, or the other one says to eat it the next day? Both of them are a question on our case. Our answer is Hastam the pasuk leilos miyamim kol v'chad yom mitzvah ba'pi nafshe. Since when it comes to the mitzvah of esrog and lulav is different than sukkah. The sukkah is straight through. The whole mitzvah never stops. You sleep and you eat, and you sleep and you eat. Everything has to be done, and you live in the sukkah, regardless if it's day or night. While it comes to the sukkah, when it comes to the lulav and esrog, that's only at night, only during the daytime. We don't take the lulav and esrog during at nighttime. Therefore, we look at each day by itself. Now, hacha and that's what we just said. The sukkah we view as one long day. So therefore, all 7 days when it comes to halacha of muksa of the mitzvah of the sukkah, we look at it as one long day, and therefore it's going to be muksa once it's on the muksa from the onset of the first night of Yom Tov. It's going to be muksa straight through. When it comes to the esrog, each and every day is going to be. We look at each and every day when it comes to the esrog as its own unique day, because the mitzvah is only on the day, not nighttime. And at nighttime, it differentiates each day due to the fact that there's no mitzvah at night anyway. Therefore, it goes not the onset of Yom Tov, it goes the onset of the day. Therefore, the one that holds you have to wait till the next day is because when it comes to the nightfall of the day which you decide to use this esrog, so the entire day is going to be muksa, but it's not going to be muksa the next day because that mitzvah has stopped. Okay, with that we go to the top of Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph. We go to the top of 31a. So Mivin Eitzim in Hasada, we bring wood from the field. If they're bundled. So here we're talking about if you want to go ahead and need fuel for your fire. So when you go out to go get wood, what are you allowed to take? So the Tanna Kama says you're allowed to take wood, which of course you're not cutting it on Yom Tov, it's detached already, and it's of course within the Tchum. But other than that, it's fine as long as you bundled it before Yom Tov. Now, when you bundle it before Yom Tov, you're showing that you have knowledge about this wood and you want to use it. It's set aside to be used on Yom Tov, therefore it's not muksa. It's not a random piece of wood which you found. It's something which you set aside before Yom Tov because it was obviously the bundling shows that it's something which you would want to use for firewood, therefore it's not muksa. And you can also collect from an enclosure. So that's, and if there's any area which is secure, that you didn't just randomly bundle wood and leave it in the field. Rather, you actually collected the wood. Obviously, you had to get into the enclosure, and then even if it's scattered around and it's not bundled, but since it's already brought into the enclosure, that shows us again that these pieces of wood is something which you want to use for firewood, and it's not some random piece of wood which you had no intention on the onset of Yom Tov. It is something which you had the intention was before Yom Tov to use for fire. Now, ask the Gemara, the Mishnah, is there karfuf? So what is called an enclosure? The answer is called Sosaymech Le'ir de Rabbi Yehuda. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's any enclosure which is near the city. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Reishi says, that anything which you have to enter with a key, meaning it's locked, even as long as it's even as at the very far end, way past the city limits, as long as it's within the Tchum Shabbos, then you could go ahead and get it. And the Gemara is going to exactly go back and forth. What does Rabbi Yosi hold? Is he being more stringent than Tanakama, or he's being more lenient? Okay, now we're going to start the Gemara on Lamed Aleph, Lamed Aleph. Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Now we're bringing another saying in the name of Yehuda Shmuel. That one could only bring wood for fire on Yom Tiv if it's bundled in the enclosure. Now, it's all like our Mishnah asks Gemara, but we learned if it's in an enclosure, it can even be scattered. So our Mishnah tells us that the type of wood which you're allowed to bring for use for firewood is as long as it's in the enclosure. If it's an enclosure, it could be scattered around. But here, Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel is being more stringent. He holds not only has to be in the enclosure and you schlepped it into the enclosure, which that itself should be enough to show you that you want to use for firewood. It even has to be bundled up and prepped, ready for fire to be used to be thrown into the fire. So Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel is being stringent in these two things: number one, enclosure; number two, it has to be bundled. That's the Gemara's question. Why is he being different than our Mishnah? No, and that we say masnisin yichidahi. So we answers that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Yeah, so we want to say that the Mishnah is a unique Mishnah, and it's really not going like any like the right halacha, because we're going to see what is the case. What is the right halacha? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Beishamai did not argue about the spread out wood which was not collected before Yom Tov out in the open field. That's going to be usher, because that obviously no one had any das, no one had any intention ever to use that for firewood, because it wasn't collected and it's out in the field. But everyone will agree that one could go ahead and bring everyone could go ahead and bring if you already schlepped it into your storehouse or into an enclosure and it's bundled. Even Beishamai would agree that's permitted, because again, everyone would agree that shows enough das, enough intention that you want to use it on Yom Tov. What do they argue on? On the spread out in the enclosure. So you did schlep it into the enclosure, but you never exactly bundled it. What? You didn't bundle it, right? Or the opposite. It's those that you did bundle in the field, but you didn't schlep it into your enclosure yet. Beishamai says you're not allowed to use those, because it's not enough das. Did you not show enough intention that this is meant to be used for fire? But Beis Hillel says you are allowed to bring it in. So what ends up happening is that this Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, which we brought down, he seems to be going like Beishamai. So don't ask us a question on our Mishnah from someone that's going like Beishamai, because we follow like Beis Hillel. Our Mishnah is going like Beis Hillel, therefore it's not a question. I mean, it's a good question, but the question is more on Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Why is he passing like Beishamai and leave the Mishnah alone? Because the Mishnah is correct. Okay, now so it ends up being that we found out this Mishnah is based on a machlek. The Tanakama is, and also Rabbi Yosi in that case, is going to be, or at least the Tanakama is based on Beis Hillel. Now Amar Rava says Ali Kanim, if you have a leaves of reeds, Ali Kafanim, and vine leaves, Afal Gav Dimakanfe Luhu, Umaisvi Kivin Dimidali Zika Mibadar Luhu Mekumvazar Damai. That if one goes ahead, even though that they're collected, and you made them into a pile, let's like leaves. It's typical now. It's fall time, so we all collect leaves, and it's not all of us, but some of us, and you make a pile of it. That's not called a pile. That's not called a bundle, because the wind could come and blow and just blow it all away. So it's not called secure. Basurin, and it's going to be usher to be used, these items, as if they're bundled, they're usher to use on Yom Tiv. That's not called that it's bundled. But if you put something on which is heavy, like you take a heavy beam and you throw it on top of it to keep it secure, on top of the shaper dummy, that's good enough to show that you are trying to contain it, and therefore it is set aside on Yom Tiv. It's enough to show us that you want to use this for firewood because you went through the effort to actually try to contain it so it doesn't blow away. Now, the Gemara continued that we asked, what is a karfif? What's called an enclosure? So the Tanna Kama said, which was Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said anything which is close to the city. And Rabbi Yossi seemed to say that no, it needs a key, even if it's far away. So the Gemara is going to ask, what exactly is Rabbi Yossi coming to argue with? So Zera Karfif. So that's the Gemara. Now, we had what was he coming to say? What was the machlekes? Now, is it the Tanna Kama that the Tanna Kama was saying that enclosure is near the city, plus it's a secure location and it's locked up. So basically, the Meiman Reisi came to say, once there is a key, that even in the Tchum Shabbos it should be permitted. So was it that the Tanna Kama was being stringent, and you need two things? You need key plus close to the city. And Rabbi Yossi was saying, no, all you need is the key. And even if it's far out, even 2,000 ames away from the city, from the walls of the city, it will still be permitted. Now, or perhaps, this is what he meant to say, that the Tanna Kama meant to say, if it's near the city, it doesn't make a difference if there's a key or not, because the Tanna Kama didn't mention anything about a key. So therefore, the Tanna Kama was saying that is if it's near the city, I don't care if there's a key or no key, no difference. That no, Rabbi Yossi was saying that it has to be that there is a key. It could be far away, but still needs a key. And he was being more stringent, and he was saying that if there is no key, even if it's right near the walls of the city, still this is not a good enough enclosure to be considered as if you had in mind to utilize this wood. So right now we have a question: is it that the Tanna? The two ways to look at it is this: if the Tanna Kama is saying if Rabbi Yehuda was saying that it has to be close to the city, plus it has to have a key, and Rabbi Yossi was being lenient and saying that he was saying that if there meaning not only could it be close without a key, it could also be far away with a key, unlike Rabbi Yehuda. Or was he saying that the Tanna Kama was saying that if it's near the city, it doesn't make a difference if there is a key, and Rabbi Yossi was being more stringent and saying that even if it is near the city, it still needs a key. So now we're going to try to prove it from our mission. Tashma. That Rabbi Yossi's language was anyone who could enter, whoever needs to enter the enclosure with a key. And he says even if it's going to be in the Tchum Shabbos. Now that usually means meaning that it's not even if it's near the walls. I mean, when it's very far out, that's when you need a key. So you see from here, the way to read the Gemara is that the way to read the Mishnah is whoever needs a key, that if you need a key to enter, and it's very far away from the city walls, meaning it's at the far end of the Tchum. In that case, it's permitted. So we can learn out from here that you only need a key if it's very far away, but if it's close to the city, you don't even need a key. So the Gemara wants to prove from here that basically is being lakula, he's being lenient, and he's coming out to say that the Tanna, like the first way, the first approach the Gemara offered, that the Tanna Kama is saying that you need a key and you have to be close. And Rabbi is saying, no, if it's close, you don't need a key. And if it's far away, it will be okay if you have a key, unlike the Tanna Kama in both points. Amar Rav Salah, Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Halacha Rabbi Yossi lahak. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, and we are being lenient. And so, according to the Gemara, the halacha at the end of the day is if you have a storehouse near the city walls, then even if it's not the most secure location, then we say it was enough to say that you had in mind to go to that storehouse on any wood in that storehouse it was set aside for Yom Tov for a fire, or even if it's extremely far away, as long as it was in Tchum Shabbos, 2,000 ames from the walls of the city, even if it's extremely far out, as long as there is a key, then that's good enough to say that you had in mind to keep wood there in a secure location for a fire on Yom Tov. and it won't be muksa.
Why do we think there's more intent if it's locked up versus, okay, it's far away, but I'm not going to shove it here right now, but I know it's here for me?
Question. I don't know. I'm not sure why. Ash just keeps on saying that it's based on a key, based on a key. I mean, you logically say that if there's no key, if it's just a wide open door, then if it's very far away, I'm not sure. I wonder if they don't. If it's because of muksa. I think it's because of muksa. Yeah, it's muksa.
All right.
No, that's a good question. Let me think. It's far away. What do you say, Tati?
What's the question?
Wait, why does it have to be locked up? Why doesn't it need a key? Back then, a key also meant mean that the door closed.
That shows that he's
You locked it
he's
behind.
more control that he
Yeah.
wants.
What was even this far from the city? So you don't have control over it.
Yeah, plus the city shows it's more
Mukhan, yeah.
You have to keep it with
It's more prepared. Also, I'm not sure key means a real key. It could just mean that actually a door that closes. Back then, they didn't really have doors that close without a key. They didn't have like they didn't have door handles. No, they didn't have.
Yeah, I was wondering if like a latch. I'm wondering.
They had a latch. No, it could be a latch. Also, it could be like a deadbolt. Like they didn't have without a deadbolt. I have in my basement. I have a door that there's no knob. So if it's not bolted, it just like swings open and it's open all night. And then you wake up in the morning, homeless person. There's no one in the basement.
Okay.
So that idea that it's not secure. So you put wood there, then but who said it's going to be there when you show up the next day? So if you put wood in there and the door's not closing, and it's not close by to watch, and you can't keep an eye on it, and it's far away, then who said? Then you put wood there, but in the back of your head, well, it might show up tomorrow morning, and it might be good and gone. So it's not like you had das. You didn't have intent. You can't say you had a full intention to use it on Yom Tov, when you for a fact that it might be gone. Anyway, while it's close to the city, and then it depends how much of a. I guess the question is the argument between Tanakh, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Boruch is how secure does it have to be in order for you to have full intention that I'm going to use this tomorrow. I'm not just I'm using tomorrow. I'm relying on this tomorrow to fuel my fire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're on the Mishnah on the back. Good question, thanks. We're on the Mishnah on the bottom Lamed Aleph on 31a. Okay, now now that we're speaking about going to get the wood, how do you chop the wood? Right, not necessarily with the wood pre-chopped before Yom Tov. So are you allowed to chop wood, and how do you go about it on Yom Tov for your fire? It says the Mishnah, in vakin eitzim, then you're not allowed to chop wood, loy min hakayris, not from the beams, and not from beams that fell on Yom Tov. For example, you have a small back house and it collapsed on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to go ahead and cut up those beams on Yom Tov. Ve'ein mavikin, and you're not allowed to chop loy bikardum, not with a axe, which we assume is just a professional axe. Loy b'magro, not with a saw. Loy b'magro, not with a sickle. I'm not sure how you cut with a sickle, but it works, I guess. Ela b'kaifetz. Rather, a kaifetz is a cleaver we had before. That's not it's not a professional tool. It's something that anyone can know how to use. While an axe, you have to be well trained to go ahead and use it. In fact, Rabbi Rimmer told me he was out in this past winter. He was going snowmobiling, and it was freezing. A whole track through, and he came to a hut. It was a warm-up hut. We were supposed to warm up, and there was a fire, but there was just like dying, and there was an axe, and there was a wood. So he saw on the wood there's many notches. A lot of people tried to cut it, and so he tried to do it and he got nowhere. Then a whole group of people came in, and they said you have to cut up the wood. Rabbi was like, good luck. He's like, yeah, I know how to do this. And once chopped, he got the whole thing. And then the person came and bang, he was able to knock it all out in one shot. So you have to know what you're doing. So therefore, an axe, it's not so simple. But to use a cleaver, you could just pound on the wood. Eventually, it'll crack. So that's why the other items we want to say that they're called professional tools. Therefore, it's a kli uman. Kli uman will be aser on Yom Tiv because that's a weekday act. And more than that, it's aser. But you could go ahead and use a cleaver, and that won't be a problem. Okay, we're on the top of 31. B, Lamed Aleph, Amud Beis. Now, Va'amrit, Reisha, Emavikin Klau. But the Gemara asks, in the beginning it says, you're not allowed to go ahead and chop, period. And then it says, well, you could go chop with using a cleaver. But we said you're not allowed to chop. Now, the reason is that in the beginning when we're thinking, it seemed like in the beginning we're saying you're not allowed to chop up because it's a tircha. It's a huge, it's a huge bother to start chopping up wood. So why later on, who cares how you're chopping it up? With whatever item you're doing it, still a big tircha and should be forbidden on Yom Tov. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, that he said that we forgot something. The Mishnah forgot a point, and this is what he said. And this is how we should read the Mishnah. In Rivin mina savar shel kairos, you're not allowed to go ahead and bring from a stack of wood. You're not allowed to cut from a stack of wood. And not from the beams that fell on Yom Tiv. Rather, you could go ahead and cut up beams that fell on Erev Yom Tiv before Yom Tiv started. Now, how do you cut up those that fell before Yom Tiv? You can't use an axe. You can't use a saw. You can't use a sickle. Rather, you only could go ahead and use a cleaver. So the Mishnah is coming to tell us that if you have stacks ready to use for building, that's muksa. You're not allowed to use it. If it's a house that fell on Yom Tiv, then it's muksa on the onset of Yom Tiv. You can't use those either. So what do you use? So we could say if you had a hut that collapsed before Yom Tiv, and you knew that it collapsed, so that you had wood, and that's not muksa at that point because we know that you plan, we know that you're aware that it fell, so therefore it's no longer muksa. And therefore, because it's not long, if you cut it up, it's not a muksa, it's not usher anymore, because technically it's just sitting on the floor, it's not a building, you're not destroying a building in the process of cutting it, and you have no plans to reuse it for a new building, like the stacks of wood, which are neatly set aside to be used for a future building project. Therefore, you have wood on the floor, Erev Yom Tiv, which you had no plans for anything, and so we assume that you wanted to use this for firewood. Now the question applies, now that the firewood's not muksa, how do you go do it? The answer, you do it. You cannot use a regular axe, rather you have to use a cleaver. Now, so I'll go ahead and cut up from the beams, from the stacks of wood, not from a rope, not from beams that broke on Yom Tiv, because these two items, the stacks of wood that we plan on using for future projects, and the beams that were part of a building on Yom Tiv itself, that is it's muksa, because you had no intention to use that for firewood, since it was neatly stacked away, and that was for building, and the building itself that collapsed before Yom Tov started, it didn't collapse yet. Therefore, of course, that's going to be muksa, and therefore the only thing you could use is from beams set aside or that collapsed before Yom Tov. And then the Gemara went ahead and spoke about how the Mishnah discussed exactly how to do it. Now the Gemara said, the Mishnah said, "Why bekardim? You're not allowed to use an axe." So Amar Rav Chanina bar Shlema mishmei Rab. Rav Chanina, the son of Shlema, said in the name of Rab, that you're only saying it's only forbidden to use an axe if you're using the wider side of it. But if you use the narrow part of it, that's permitted. And the reason is because the professionals, the craftsmen, they use the wide side. They never use the narrow side to cut the wood. Therefore, the narrow side is not really a melachas uman. It's not a professional act. Therefore, it's permitted to use. Now we say pshita, because it's not. But in that the Gemara asks, it's obvious that because we said a cleaver, and all cleavers are thin, so we can do the assumption ourselves. If you could use a cleaver because it's thin, therefore you could use the thin side of the axe as well. So the Gemara is asking, it's obvious. I would say now the same that no, perhaps you only are allowed to use a cleaver by itself. But let's say you had a type of an axe, a type of a cleaver that was double-sided, now one side was thick and one side was thin. There were type of cleavers that were different type of cleavers. One side was, till now we were just talking about a one-sided blade, but they also had double-sided blades. And so he said, I might think that's going to be forbidden. Mishomigu the haigisa aser, haigisanami aser. I might think that since one side is forbidden, the other side is also forbidden. Therefore, the Gemara has come to tell you, no, that when it comes to a cleaver, it's always going to be permitted regardless of since it's not an axe, it will end up being permitted. Now, so that's one way to understand the Gemara. So now, some has to say this, learn this entire piece going on the end of the Gemara, the end of the Mishnah. It says Ella b'kaif. It's a Mishnah says you got to go ahead and use using a cleaver is permitted. That no, we're only talking about the thin part of the cleaver. That's permitted. But when we're talking about a two-sided cleaver and there's a wide side to it, that's going to be forbidden. It's pshita. The Gemara asks that's going to be for pshita. We say that's obvious. Now, so why is that going? So the Gemara asked. So Gemara asked pshita. That's obvious. So we say v'lei b'kardam. We said you're not allowed to use a kardam. We said it's obvious. If you come and tell us that a cleaver, a two-sided cleaver, you're only allowed to use the thin side, not the wide side. That's obvious because when we said the axe, and by the axe we said that's also forbidden. And the axe is right now we're talking about an axe that an axe is. Why would an axe be forbidden? Because of the wide side. So if axe is forbidden, so then the wide side of a cleaver should also be forbidden. And then we say, I might think we're talking only about a axe. Now, the axe in this case would be that's only wide on both sides. But if you have a two-bladed cleaver, one side is thin, one side is wide. Since the thin side is permitted, the wide side will also be permitted. At the end of the day, we say no. It's going to be even that is going to be forbidden. The wide side of the cleaver will also be forbidden. So it looks like at the end of the day, according to this, the way we understand what this is that we said you're allowed to use a cleaver, but you're only allowed to go ahead and use the thin side of the cleaver, not the thick side of the cleaver. Okay. Now we're on the next Mishnah. On Lamed Aleph on the base on 31b. Now it says so we have the Mishnah. The Mishnah starts as follows: Baishu mali peiros v'nefchas. If let's say you have a house which is full of fruits, now and there was really no way to enter the house on the onset of Yom Tov. You couldn't get in. Now and all of a sudden somehow there was a breach in the wall, and now you're able to walk through the wall and get to your fruits. What's the halacha? That you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to remove the fruit from the house, from this room, going through the hole in the wall, going through the hole on the wall. And we're not going to say that since it was muksa, since the onset of Yom Tov, you couldn't get into the room because the only way to get into the room was to smash down a wall. That's obviously usher on Yom Tov. So we're not. Now I would assume to say since on the onset of Yom Tov, the entire room was perhaps muksa. Because you couldn't enter, and the only way to enter was through a forbidden act. So even though the wall was busted somehow on Yom Tiv, still it's going to be forbidden entire Yom Tiv because on Yom Tiv it was muksa. You couldn't get in there. We're saying no. It's according to the Tanna Kama, it's not a problem, and it's permitted to go now. It's permitted to go in and get your fruit. Rameir. So the Gemara is going to explain. That's not. I think the Gemara is going to say that there was no Isser Daraisa because the wall didn't have any cement or something. We're going to see. The Gemara is going to talk about it. I think the Gemara is going to. Okay. Now Rameir says Af Paisa. Now Rameir is saying no. You could even go ahead, and the Gemara is going to explain why again. That you could go ahead and you could breach yourself on Yom Tov. V'naita. So the Gemara is gonna. So Rameir is saying something interesting. You don't have to wait for it to be knocked down. You yourself could remove the wall on Yom Tov and go in to get the fruit. Okay, so we have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says if you had a storeroom and you couldn't access it unless you did a forbidden. Okay, the Gemara really. Let me phrase that. You have a storeroom, and then you couldn't enter it on Erev Yom Tov, and it got breached, and somehow on Yom Tov you're able to enter because there was a hole appeared. You're able to go in and get the fruit according to the Tanna Kama. According to Rameir, you're even allowed to remove the wall yourself. And that, the Gemara asks immediately, how could you do that? You yourself, you are removing, you're being seiser. You're removing, you're making a breach in a wall that you're not allowed to do that on Yom Tov. So we say, Amrav Nachumi Barada Amar Shmuel Bavira Delisi. we're talking about literally it makes the ear of bricks, meaning that you didn't cement it, you just placed the bricks on top of each other. So there's really no problem. There's no act of when you're removing it. It's not a problem because it's not connected to each other. Therefore, it's like removing Lego blocks, perhaps. So it's definitely not a daraisa. So therefore, it's going to be permitted. That's why our mayor says it's permitted. Ain't is that so? Rav Nachman Hani Livni the Isur Nivinina that we said now, and that we say as follows. Is that really true? Rav Nachman says as follows: you have leftover bricks. You're allowed to go ahead and move them on Shabbos. Because you could go sit on them. So even though let's say you finished a building project, you left over bricks on the side. We said it's permitted to utilize them on Yom Tiv because you no longer need them for the building, and you could sit on them. However, but if you pile them in a very nice pile and they're not scattered all over the place, you pile them up. It's new. At that point, it's going to be muksa. And the reason why it's going to be muksa because we assume if you pile them away nicely, you plan on using them for a later project. So, and now we have a question. In this case, the bricks aren't cemented. So if over here in the case the bricks aren't cemented, we said you might want to use them later on. Therefore, they're muksa on the onset of Yom Tov. So for sure, this wall, which was, even though there's no cement, it's just bricks on top of bricks, but removing the bricks and taking away the wall, that should be a muksa. Rav Zera, b'Yom Tov amru avloi b'Shabbos. And now we say no. That this whole halacha of removing the bricks is permitted only on Yom Tov. That is because of Eichel Nefesh. Since on Yom Tov we allow whatever, in order to get the food, we permit many things. This is part of it. It's not going to be muksa because of the halacha of we allow it to go ahead and move it because we want you to get your food on Yom Tov and Simchas Yom Tov. Now, Tamina Mehachi. Yeah.
Line check, please.
We're first one line is Tanya. Nami, we're about 10.
Nami hockey?
Yep.
Okay.
Tanya Mehachi or Meir Omer and then in fact we have a mayor telling us that's halacha. You're allowed to take down a wall on Yom Tiv lechatchila in order to get to the food. You're not allowed to go ahead and do it on Yom Tiv. So on Shabbos.
She said, because if it's above.
Right, yeah, that's right. She says it, right. So, as we said, that the reason why this at the end of the day, this is the same Rameir in the Mishnah. According to Rameir, one is permitted to remove a wall on Yom Tov as long as it's not the Raisa, it's not attached to anything. Therefore, if they're just a layer on top of layer without cement at all, you could take it down in order to enter on Yom Tov because of Eichel Nefesh, because it's permitted to go get food for Simchas Yom Tov. Now, Amar Shmuel, Chesomei shebekarka matir. That if one has he has a sort of a cellar, and it's locked up, one is permitted with ropes now, and he wants to enter it on Yom Tiv. One is permitted to cut open or untie the ropes on Yom Tiv in order to get it. One cannot go ahead. You can untie them, but you can't go ahead. But one cannot go ahead and cut them if they're attached to the ground. If these ropes are attached to the ground, we don't let you to go ahead. We don't let you go ahead and cut them up because at that point it's connected to the ground. If it's connected to the ground, then that's going to be stira. It's going to be you're destroying something just like you can't build. You're not destroy it, and it's connected to the ground. You could untie them, but you're not allowed to go ahead and cut them up. Shebekalim. When it comes to vessels, let's say you have a box which is tied up with a string. Matir or mafkiya, you do what you want. You can untie it and you can cut it. No matter whether on Shabbos, whether on Yom Tov. So we have a law that depends. When are you allowed to cut a rope? Or so when it comes to getting food in a cellar, you're allowed to untie it on Yom Tov in order to get down to the cellar to get the food. But you're not allowed to cut them because it's connected to the ground. You're being slicer, you're destroying something which is connected to the ground, which is forbidden. However, when it comes to a box, something which is movable, not connected to the ground, then you can do what you want to the rope, whether it's Shabbos, whether it's Yom Tov. Now that we have a question. Meisvei, we have a question. We say as follows: that the ropes that tie to that you have a cellar that the cellar doors are shut with, then on Shabbos is permitted to untie. But you're not allowed to go ahead and cut them off. one could go do what you want to the ropes. But we just finished saying on Yom Tov you're only allowed to untie them, not cut them. And here we have a brisa telling us that you're allowed to go ahead and even cut them on Yom Tov. So we have a contradiction. That we say, Haman you're a mayor. So that's going to be a mayor. That must be Rameir. The one who's being lenient must be Rameir. So Rameir also says that when you have a storeroom, you're allowed to remove the bricks in order to get them for Yom Tov. So only on Yom Tov we have a very big kula, that we have a leniency, you're allowed to do what you want to get to the food. So therefore, same thing with the cellar door, you could do what you want to the ropes in order to get the door open. But the rabbis arguing him. And the one who said this over, I think it was Shmuel. So Shmuel, who said the original memra, who said that one is only allowed to untie them on Yom Tov, he goes like the Rabbanan, he doesn't go like Rameir. So therefore the second one is like Rameir said that on Yom Tov you could do what you want to get the cellar door open, while the rabbis said you're not allowed to, on Yom Tov you're only allowed to cut them. You're not allowed to cut them, you're only allowed to untie them. And Shmuel, who said the original statement, was going like the rabbis. Now that we say, and we have a question on Shmuel, and do the rabbis really argue on Rameir when it comes to these chesemim in the karka, these tied up cellar doors? But Vatani we learned as follows: Moedim chacham Rameir. The rabbis agreed to Rameir when it came to these cellar doors which are tied up in the ground. Shebishabes maftir, on Shabbos you're allowed to go ahead and untie them. That he agreed to Rameir that on Shabbos you're not allowed to untie them, and you're only allowed to untie them. You can't do anything else. But on Yom Tov you could do what you want to them. So we see the Rabbanan argue on don't go like Shmuel. Shmuel said that on Yom Tov you're only allowed to untie them. We have an open brisa that seems to say the rabbis agreed to Rameir that on Yom Tov you could go ahead and even cut them. That would be a question on Shmuel. So that we turn to the top of Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. We turn to the top of 32a. Say Huda Amar Kiyei Tana. So you're right. Shmuel's not going like the Rabban. He's going like a different Tana. Who's the Tana? The Tanya we learn Cheslamish as follows. The Tanya, because we have following brisa. Cheslamish shebekarka. If you have these cellar doors which are tied up with rope. Matter, you can untie them. But you can't go ahead and you can't cut them at all when it comes to whether it's Shabbos, whether it's Yom Tov. When it comes to a vessel or anything movable, Shabbos matir, on Shabbos you could untie them. But you're not supposed to go ahead and do anything, you're not allowed to cut them on Shabbos. But when it comes to Yom Tov, then you're allowed to go ahead and untie them, and you're allowed to cut them when it comes to the box. So now we are saying, we changed the tune a little bit. Originally we had Shmuel claiming that he's like the Rabbanon, and the Rabbanon are the ones that say that on Yom Tov, one is not allowed to go ahead and cut the cellar doors, the ropes tied to the cellar doors because it's connected to the ground. Therefore, it's going to be a problem of stira, of destroying something connected to the ground. But now we're changing. The Rabbanon really agreed to Rameir that you could, when it comes to Shabbos, you could cut if it's connected to the ground. And Shmuel is going like a different Tana, a different unknown author who said that no, on Yom Tov, one is only allowed to cut it and not only allowed to untie it, and you're not allowed to cut it. And that we say, but tirsa lach reisha. So very good, you answered the first part, ala seifa kasha, but the seifa is now a problem because if you look at the seifa, what we just mentioned, we said when it comes to a vessel on Shabbos, you're only allowed to go ahead, you're not allowed to cut it, you only can untie it. But before we saw that when it comes to a vessel, that according to Shmuel, he said that you could do what you want to a vessel on Yom Tov or on Shabbos. So very good, we fixed the first part, and we found a Tana in the brisa that goes like Shmuel when it comes to the cellar door, but now he's in trouble because the end of that brisa, which he brought the proof to help him out when it came to the cellar door, is now causing problems when it comes to the vessel. This Tana in this brisa claims that one is not allowed to cut the string on a box on Shabbos, while it's Shmuel himself claimed that you could do what you want to a box on Shabbos. You could cut it or untie it. Now we're left with another question. So we say, Hamani Reb Nechemiah. That no, this Tana is Reb Nechemiah. The Amar, Reb Nechemiah says, Kol hakelim ein natilin ela derech tashmishan. That when you come to cut, not that he's focusing on a different issue, not the cutting of the box, but rather how you're going to get it done. The Rabbi Chemia is one that holds that you're only allowed to go ahead and use a knife for its use. Now, if you take a knife and use it to cut, you're not allowed to take a knife and use to cut open a box, because that's what knives are used to cut food, not to cut open, not to access items in a box, or access scissors. Maybe that's a different story. But back then they didn't have scissors, therefore you can't take a knife and cut it, and you only can untie it. Now, if that's true, if the whole problem is a muksa issue, the problem is not, technically you're right. You could go ahead and everyone agrees you could cut open a box, you could cut the string of a box on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So, and Rabbi Chemia was saying, well, you could technically do it, just we have a problem that how you're going to get it done. You're not allowed to use a knife for that purpose. It's a muksa for anything other than cutting food. Now, but then you have a problem. If the whole issue is a muksa, ma irya Shabbos afil Yom Tov nami. Then understand Rabbi Nechemia and the Bryce we just mentioned on the top of this Amud, he said that on Yom Tov you could do what you want. You could cut it or you could untie it. But on Shabbos you only can untie it, you can't cut it. If you say the whole reason you can't cut it is just a technicality, you have no way to get it cut because the knife is not supposed to be used to cut string, rather should only be used to cut cut food, then what makes a difference Shabbos and Yom Tov? It's all muksa. So Shabbos and Yom Tov, usually there's no difference in Shabbos and Yom Tov when it comes to muksa. So what's the difference? Why is it you're allowed to use a knife on Yom Tov to cut the box open, but you can't use it on Shabbos? And if you want to say no, maybe Rabbi Nechemia takes an approach which is not the most the unused approach, the uncommon approach, that there's a difference between muksa on Shabbos and muksa on Yom Tov. Is that really true? Does he learn that? We learned that you're allowed to use regular. Let's say you're running out of fuel and you want to use some pottery burns well. You want to take the pottery, if it does, or you have a wooden. I'll take that back. You have a wooden spoon, and you're running out of fuel, and you want to use the wooden spoon as fuel for a wood fire. So therefore, you could take it. So we have another price that says that you're allowed to take it and throw it into the fire. Now, the aim masikin b'shivrei kelim, but you can't go ahead and use broken kelim. You can't use a broken vessel for the fire. The Tanya idach, we have elsewhere masikin bein kelim bein b'shivrei kelim, and we have elsewhere that says you're allowed to go ahead and you can use broken vessels or non-broken vessels. The Tanya idach, we have a third one, aim masikin v'makelim loy b'shivrei kelim. You can't use anything. Those things are all muksa when it comes to the firewood. Now, and we continue. We didn't finish the question yet. We answer like Kasha, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nechemia. One's Rabbi Yehuda, one's Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nechemia. So as follows: that we had a three-way machlekes. Is one allowed to use a vessel, allowed to use a utensil to throw into the fire to add fuel to the fire on Yom Tov? So one said yes. That's going to be Shmuel. Shmuel is the one. Rabbi Shimon, sorry. Rabbi Shimon is the one who said there's no muksa on Yom Tov. There's no big issue. Overall, there's no muksa. Therefore, you can do what you want. Just because this was set aside to be eaten with doesn't make a difference. You can now supposed to throw into the fire. Then we had someone who's extremely stringent. No, you're not allowed to take any utensil, throw into the fire. That must be Rabbi Yehuda, who holds of the idea of muksa. That's the Rabbi Yehuda we always have. He holds the muksa. Therefore, since on the onset of Yom Tov or Shabbos, or rather Yom Tov, this was a utensil set aside to eat with, you cannot go ahead and use it on Yom Tov for fire. Then you have a middle approach. I said, well, if it's broken, yes. If it's not broken, no. And so that must be Rabbi Nechemia. So why are you coming to tell me? So it must be according to if Rabbi Nechemia is not letting you go ahead and use broken kalim. So, but the point is, we see that he lets you use broken. He lets you use a utensil which was not broken. He lets you throw into the fire, so that we're not left any trouble. And we said that's Rabbi Nechemia. So we see Rabbi Nechemia does let you use items which not for its purpose, because he says you can take a spoon and throw into the fire, and it's not muksa. But we're learning that if it's really true that Nechemia holds that Yom Tov is different than Shabbos, then in Yom Tov he should let you use any. Then he should. So we see that on Yom Tov you are allowed to go ahead. So we see that on Yom Tov that you should be able to use even shivrei kelim, right? So we say but then so why? We want to say that he differentiates between Shabbos and Yom Tov, right? Rabbi Nechemia is the one that says everything's okay? Right, but then he's the one that says that you can't use shivrei kelim, right? Is it that's not that's what Rashi said? Mm-hmm. Yeah, hold on.
It's 5-2.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so Rabbi was the one that was being machmir, right? Okay, I learned it wrong. So Rabbi is the one that's being machmir. He said you can't even use shiv. You can't use any kelim. You can't use any. Yeah, that's Rabbi Yehuda. That must be okay. So let's go. I'll just focus on Rabbi Nechemia, and then we'll wrap it up. According to Rabbi Nechemia, you can't use any utensil in the fire whatsoever. You can't use a wooden utensil whether it's broken or not broken, no matter what. So you see Rabbi Nechemia, and this must be Yom Tov, because otherwise in Shabbos you can't add fuel to any fire anyway. Must be Rabbi Nechemia holds that even on Yom Tov, if you're not using it for its designated use, it's muksa. So you want to say that Shabbos and Yom Tov is different. On Shabbos, and Shabbos was when he was stringent, he only could use it for his designated use. But on Yom Tov, you can use it for any use. But here we have an open mission that seems to be saying Nechemia even holds that even on Yom Tov you can't use it for designated use. So if you want to come and tell me that when it comes to the reason why Nechemia says you're allowed to use a knife to open a box on Yom Tov, but not on Shabbos, is because on Shabbos he's stringent and holds of this idea of muksa. You only use utensil for its use, but now on Yom Tov you cannot. We don't apply that, and we're lenient. And we have Rabbi Nechemia that says we're stringent even when it comes to Yom Tov. Now we answer Sheitanai believe Rabbi Nechemia. No, the answer is it's true. He doesn't have machlekes in the words of Rabbi Nechemia. Some say on Yom Tov he is stringent. Some say on Yom Tov he's going to be lenient. So at the end of the day, Shmuel is following Rabbi Nechemia. Thank you.